How much are you willing to lean into discomfort in order to achieve your goals? That's a genuine question. Sometimes we have enough energy for our stretch goals, and sometimes we just need to rest. How do you decide if your short-term discomfort is going to achieve long-term goals, or if you just need to resist grind culture and not assume that it's going to be uncomfortable in order to achieve success? How do you determine where you fall somewhere on the scale between resting and challenging yourself? Hi, this is Sarah Russell. I'm a relationship coach, dancer, and Taoist. In every episode, I'll be talking about psychedelics, well-being, or the human experience, and this one is your mind on cold plunging. So y'all remember the marshmallow test from the early 70s, right? Where they put a kid in a room with no distractions and they put a marshmallow on the table in front of them and they said, hey kid, you could eat that marshmallow right now if you wanted to. Or if you waited 15 minutes and didn't eat that marshmallow, we'll give you a second marshmallow and then you can have two instead of one. And it was this idea that they could then test for delayed gratification. The idea being that if you had enough willpower to delay gratification, that you were going to have what they termed better life results, right? And, parts of the study have been debunked because I guess in about half of the cases, it wasn't just willpower, like economic factors also play into this. And yet there's still this idea of, are you willing to put off, this is my mom saying, I got to give her credit for this. Will you put off what you want for what you want right now? Right. So she's constantly telling me, don't give up what you want for what you want right now. Delayed gratification. And I have this curiosity in my body about whether or not those of us that like cold plunging are the ones that go, yeah, I'd crush the marshmallow test. I would absolutely crush it. Of course I could delay it. I could delay that half an hour. I could delay that 2 days because grit and resilience and all of that, those things that we value. So the difference between cold plunging and the marshmallow test is that during the marshmallow test, the kids were allowed to distract themselves. They could play games. They could sing to themselves. One kid tried to fall asleep and succeeded, actually fell asleep on the table. And so they were intentionally dropping out of their discomfort, right? Their agitation and anxiety and whatever else was going on in their bodies before they got the reward. With cold plunging, you're supposed to sit with your discomfort. And this makes me think of that scene in Fight Club where Brad Pitt takes Ed Norton's hand, kisses it to make it wet, and then pours lye all over it. So there's this chemical burn that's happening. And Ed Norton is trying to escape to his penguin cave, right? And Brad Pitt keeps yanking him back to the present moment. He wants him to stay present with his pain. And I'm not suggesting cold plunge is as bad as Fight Club, but there is this idea of you're supposed to sit with your discomfort and not distract yourself with it the way they did in the marshmallow test. And, you know me, I'm always going to have a little disclaimer here. Dissociation is a valid response from discomfort. And I'm not trying to get rid of dissociation altogether. But this idea of being able to practice staying present with pain or discomfort or anxiety or whatever the negative emotion is or sensation is that we're experiencing is also something that I think is worthwhile to train so that we can have both dissociation and present moment awareness where we can stay with what is. Now, there are lots of touted benefits to cold plunging. Right now, I'm going to be focusing specifically on the mental health benefits, specifically as a tool to manage stress, anxiety, and depression. In general, I like to take things slow and easy. I'm pretty cozy. I have my morning and evening rituals that ease me in and out of my day with lots of intentional care. I'm also part of the graduating high school class of 99, and that year, Baz Luhrmann released a single called Everybody's Free to Wear Sunscreen. Y'all remember this? He has a line where he says, live in New York once, but leave before it makes you hard. Live in California once, but leave before it makes you soft. And so there is this idea of how much discomfort is the right amount, right? Like how much do we actually just need to give ourselves a break and take it easy? And when is it time to move out of Northern California so you don't get too soft? I love it here in Santa Cruz, so that's not going to happen. So instead, I immerse my body in cold water. So I'm telling you, I like it soft and I like it cozy, but I also highly value cultivating resiliency practices. And resiliency practices for me include connecting with nature, talking with spirit, and various forms of cold therapy. And that can include immersing yourself in cold water, cold showers, or even putting yourself in cold air. And cold therapy isn't new, right? This is a really ancient medicine. It is actually mentioned in the oldest known medical text, which is the Edwin Smith Papyrus, which dates back to 3500 BC. And all of the different forms of cold therapy, it's said to remove, well, we know, it removes heat, it reduces core and tissue temperatures, it changes your blood flow. And the results can make it sound like a wonder drug, right? Increased focus, decreased inflammation, it burns fat, better sleep, supports the immune system. All of these claims. And those claims feel a little counterintuitive because it's really freaking uncomfortable to do it, right? Like it can make your body, borderline pain. I don't know about pain. Like it depends, right? How cold the water is, but definitely discomfort, definitely agitation, anxiety, like having to, really rally yourself before you're willing to get in the water and then convince yourself to stay in it, despite the fact that everything in your mind and body is screaming for you to get out and get warm again. So with cold therapy, you're really pushing the limits of both your body and your mind. And since we're focusing on the mind, I want to talk about specifically how cold therapy can affect things like depression and anxiety. With depression and anxiety, I'm talking about cold plunging like it's this wonderful thing, because it is for me and others. I want to acknowledge that cold plunging is an effort-based intervention to managing depression and anxiety. And with depression and anxiety, you're also going to want effortless tools. So I'm not about to keep a score chart on what's better, pharmaceuticals or cold therapy. We all have our various ways of managing these different conditions, right? So some people will take psychedelics like psilocybin. Some people will get a prescription from their doctor. Some people will cold plunge. Some people will do combinations or variations of those and other things. So I want to recognize effortless practices are amazing. And also when you have energy, when you have the motivation, when you have the spaciousness, an efforting practice like cold plunging can be incredibly beneficial. Because you're developing resiliency. You're developing a practice of being able to be with what is, even when what is isn't pleasant. And when we cold plunge, what we're doing is we're actually triggering a pretty classic fight or flight response, right? And you know this because your breathing changes. Your breath rate increases. You may gasp when you hit the cold water. And then also from studies, we know that there's a release of neurotransmitters such as dopamine and norepinephrine, also known as noradrenaline. And, lack of norepinephrine is one of the things that potentially contributes to depression. And so you have all these peripheral nerve endings, right, that respond to cold in a particular way. And so when you're exposing those nerve endings to the cold, you're releasing noradrenaline or norepinephrine in the brain. So potentially you're taking care of one of the neurotransmitter reasons for depression. And that's also why this increase in the breath response and this increase in these neurotransmitters, that's why you'll see people doing the Wim Hof kind of stuff where they're doing structured breathing in cold water, trying to move from a sympathetic nervous system response, that fight, flight, now we got to run, we got to get away from the tiger in the grass, and then shifting that through structured breathing and relaxation practices into the parasympathetic response, which is more of a rest and digest. So we're triggering ourselves and then we're bringing ourselves back to center. And we can do that over and over again as a way to start having an embodied practice for how we come back to center when we're knocked off. Okay, but does this sound like fun? It's fun for me sometimes. When I'm practicing, it's not so fun when it's just happening out in the world and I'm getting knocked off center randomly. So, why would we put ourselves through this? Because this is a gritty practice. These resiliency practices, they're challenging, right? And again, it helps to be an intensity fiend if you're going to enter into these kinds of practices. But the thing is, you are going to get triggered out in the world. Things are going to knock you off your center when you're not expecting it. And so this is a little bit like a martial arts practice, right? Where you're like, I just need to be ready to take the energy that's coming in towards me, redirect it. There's that quote that I love from O Sensei, which y'all are just going to hear me say all the time, where one of his students is rumored to have asked him, "Oh, Sensei, how is it that you never got knocked off center?" And he responds with, "Oh, I get knocked off my center all the time. I just come back to center so quickly you don't see it." And so we put ourselves through these practices as a way to be able to return ourselves to center so that we don't get knocked off quite so much, so that we can come back quicker, so that we have muscle memory about how to center ourselves through stress. When we're doing that, so that fight flight response is impulsive, right? It's really quick. And that impulsive habituated response is one of the ways that we recreate our past. But being able to respond instead of react, because if we've practiced, the response that we want when we get knocked off center actually allows us more choice, and choice is what allows us to generate a different future. And Andrew Huberman, who talks about cold therapy all of the time, can't recommend him enough, just listening to him all the time, often on repeat. He has something to say about being able to change our stress threshold, this idea that we could somehow modify our stress threshold so that when things are stressful in our life, we have a different response to them. He said in a tweet, quote, "Raising your stress threshold and not getting triggered is not a mysterious process. It involves learning to suppress action and speech despite high levels of adrenaline." I'm going to pause there for just a second, because have you ever been triggered and then all of a sudden you start saying things very quickly, or you send off that text like, oh yeah, being able to suppress action and speech despite being triggered? Love him. Okay, getting back to the quote. There are science-supported tools for this, including ice baths, cold showers, and then he talks about some breathing practices too, but I'm going to focus on the cold for this. And he goes on to say, and yes, learning to remain quiet with high levels of adrenaline in your brain and body is useful. Don't distract yourself by going elsewhere, doing math or singing in your head, etc. Little side note from me here, or going into your penguin cave. And then he goes on to say, grit, resilience, and mental toughness are about leaning in, not checking out. And he has this really sweet idea that I've been practicing in my travels. My favorite is to find a hot spring next to a cold river. The most recent one that I went into was the hot spring was pouring over this cliff and it was scalding hot. And then the river next to it still had icicles in it. So extreme difference in temperatures. Again, intensity fiend, you know I love it. You might too. But he has this idea of once you've immersed yourself in the cold water, that you want moving limbs and a still mind. Okay, but why? Because when you're moving your limbs, you're actually increasing the discomfort again, right? You're not just able to kind of like check out and, cocoon yourself in one spot. And then being able to quiet your mind through that discomfort is such a practice of resiliency. So we're increasing discomfort with intentional awareness, being able to suppress the chatter of the mind, those distraction techniques as a way to be with what is, to come back to center. I was also taking an aloe yoga class with Tani Janae, who said, and I just love this, don't confuse sensation with emotion. So this idea that you could be immersed in cold water and experiencing very unpleasant things, and you don't need to turn that into a negative emotion. Although that's easier said than done, right? When we're immersing ourselves in cold water, we're actually creating a controlled environment. So again, out in the world when we're getting triggered, like we don't have control over externals in that moment, right? But when we are intentionally immersing ourselves in cold water through a cold plunge, through a cold shower, we are giving ourselves the opportunity to practice the response that we want to have. So again, getting reps in your body in a controlled environment. So the next time you're out of control in some way, or you're in an environment where you don't have control, you already have all of that practice for how you know you want to respond. And you've also built some trust in your body's capacity to respond to stressful situations and survive. So rather than going, I have to protect myself from anything negative ever happening to me because I don't trust myself to recover from it, you have this practice in your body where you go, I've got this because I've done it so many times before. I know I can be uncomfortable. I know I can be stressed out, and I know I can be fine. I know how to recover from that. And the Taoists talk about this, like you're training to be a tree, right? So the tree grows these deep roots. So there's this stability, there's this firm base, this firm foundation, this grounding. And then it grows these flexible branches that can bend but not break in the wind. So you're super rooted, you're super grounded, but you're also flexible and adaptable and mutable to whatever life blows your way. I had a personal experience of this practice really being beneficial recently, where I was having a down day. It had been a tough couple of days. Y'all know a lot of stuff is always going on in the world and in our personal lives. And a friend of mine posted a meme on Instagram that said, like when you're depressed, the shower is the bad, wet place. And I was definitely having those like, oh, the shower is a bad, wet place, and I just don't want to get in. And this is really common with depression, right? Where showering can be hard. Basic things can be hard. Brushing your teeth can be hard. Feeding yourself can be hard. So I was like, oh God, I need to get in the shower and I don't want to. And the intensity fiend in me was like, well, since we're going to do it and it's going to be miserable, you might as well make it freezing cold on top of it. So I turned the water all the way to cold and I got in and, fully immersed myself in the cold spray from the shower. And I gotta tell y'all, it shifted my state, it shifted my physical state, it shifted my emotional state. It gave me just enough of a boost in order to be able to do the next thing that I needed to do, even though I was sad, even though I was low energy. And so this practice, I love it. I'm curious, how do you feel about cold plunging? Have you done it? Do you love it? Do you want to try it? Do more of it? Where are you on the cold plunging journey? Because, this is trending hard right now. So sometimes we need to rest. Sometimes, like I said, you need to lay down in the sun naked and just absorb solar rays. Sometimes you're ready to strip down, immerse yourself in cold water, face your discomfort. We need both practices, right? We need both. And so wherever you are in your practices, whatever it is that you need, I hope you get it. I hope you give yourself exactly what you need. For more info, you can follow our Instagram account at drinkmudwater. Please also go to trendswithbenefits.com to check out all of our written content on psychedelics, well-being, and the human experience. And y'all, I am so pleased to tell you that I get to offer you 20% off your next Mud Water order. You can use the code TWB20. That's TWB20 in order to get 20% off your next order. And by using that code, you're actually supporting this podcast so that I can keep creating content for you, which I super appreciate. Have a great day.